Hey everyone, I'm so glad that you can make it today to our session, and I hope that you're having a really awesome Google I/O. My name is Zachary Senzer, and I am a product manager on the Actions on Google and Google Assistant teams.
And I'm Barrie, and I'm a program manager for Google Assistant focused on discovery. We really want people to find your content and use it on Google Assistant. And today, we're here to talk about how your content can reach millions of devices on Google Assistant, really without much work at all for you. So by day 2 of I/O, this may be a refresher, but just a quick overview of the opportunity that presents itself to you with Google Assistant. Assistant really helps people get things done with over 1 million actions. Actions is the word that we use to describe things that Assistant can do. And Assistant is ready to help wherever users are, with over 500 million voice-activated devices like Google Home, eligible mobile phones, and other devices with screens where Google Assistant works. Assistant's available across the globe in more than 25 locales, and by the end of this year, in 80 countries and 30 languages. So that's a lot of devices and a lot of actions that Assistant can do, and a lot of potential users for your content. So how can you bring your site's content into this ecosystem? Google's presented ways for you to optimize content for search since what my kids would call the 1900s. For sites with content in popular areas like news, podcasts, and recipes, the same kinds of optimizations that you have likely made already for search will also help your content become discoverable in Google Assistant. So we'll be explaining how to use structured data and AMP in your content to help drive traffic to your site for both Assistant and for search at the same time with the same work on your part. So our research shows that users are accessing information in new ways with different kinds of use cases throughout the day. We know that users are accessing media and news content in their morning and in their commute routines, and then in the evening around meal preparation, recipe content becomes interesting. Google's put a lot of thought into how to be there for the user throughout the day in these different kinds of use cases. So as a user, I can be in conversation with Google Assistant throughout the day to get things done in my world. Let's take, for example, Zach at the center of his world. Let's say Zach missed the latest episode of his favorite podcast. He can just ask his assistant to play it. Or, if he's not sure what he wants to listen to, he can explore different podcasts to try. At dinner time, when Zach is hungry for ideas and isn't sure what to make, he asks his assistant for recipes. Assistant on mobile presents a carousel of recipes that are easy to browse and load quickly, and with a single tap, he can choose a Food Network recipe to send straight to his Google Home. So Zach doesn't have to worry about handling his phone in the kitchen when he might be busy using his hands to cook whatever it is that he's making for dinner. And Google Assistant is there throughout the day to help with lots of other use cases too, like reading the news, translations, getting directions, sorting through photos, and more. So let's have a look at how some providers are getting content to users like Zach and many others throughout the day. Here are 3 examples. So structured data markup can produce carousels and rich results in Google Assistant by asking a voice-activated device to hear the news or listen to a podcast or find a recipe. A user is connected to content right away. On the left, a user is asking for top stories in business, and right away gets a carousel of the latest headlines, rendered quickly with nice imagery from the source site of the New York Times. In the middle, a user is asking for and gets recipes from Food Network. Easy to browse and select a recipe to send straight to Google Home. And then on the right, another user asks her Google Assistant to play Planet Money, and immediately she starts hearing the latest episode from NPR. So this is the Actions directory. You might know that the Actions directory has a listing for each and every action that users can do on Assistant. When recipe, podcast, and news providers optimize your content using structured data, you become eligible for an auto-generated page listed in the Actions directory. The Actions directory is organized both by category, like food and drink, and it's also organized by things that users are trying to do, like find food recipes or play a podcast. So that means that your action, your content, could be presented in multiple places in the directory, depending what users are trying to do. We built the Actions directory to be accessible with a single tap from Google Assistant, like you see here, on mobile. And there's also a version for web, available on the desktop and also for mobile browsers. And each page is shareable, so you could promote your action, or your current users could share it with their friends or with their followers. So there are 3 things that you can choose to do to get your content best integrated with Assistant. Structured data and AMP are key to optimizing for search and for Assistant with the same work to do both. When you invest in structured data, you enable more discovery on more devices and help users get things done throughout their day. Also, implementing best practices with structured data can make your content eligible for carousels and rich results, like you just saw, and for a page on the Actions directory. When you further enhance your content using AMP, it helps your mobile pages to load quickly and take advantage of Google AMP Cache. We'll also talk about how you can take things further and claim your Actions directory page to make it your own and participate in additional features like user reviews. And you can consider going further to build your own custom action using the Actions on Google developer platform. We'll cover all 3 in the talk. So I've mentioned structured data markup and AMP a few times already, and let's just make sure we're all on the same page about that. AMP stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages, and the AMP icon is an indication to users that this mobile page will load quickly and smoothly. When a user selects an AMP mobile page, search retrieves it from Google AMP Cache, which enables a variety of load optimizations. Google uses structured data markup on the web to best understand the content on each and every page. Structured data markup is a standardized format for specifying information about a page and classifying it. So if I have a recipe page, what are the ingredients, the cook time, nutrition information, and so on. You help Google Search understand content on your pages by giving explicit clues that come when you conform to the standards with structured data markup. There are really well-documented standards for structured data that vary by content type, and the standards are consistent with open standards for schema.org. So we're going to look at examples for news, podcasts, and recipes today. There are a few different ways to specify your structured data for web pages. JSON-LD, or JavaScript Open Notation with linked data, is encoding that's used by Google's Knowledge Graph. JSON-LD shows up like a big blob of code near the head of each page, and it starts with a script tag that says, hey browser, calling the JavaScript that contains some JSON-LD. So this really simple snippet of markup says, this is a website type. I'm using the vocabulary from schema.org, and the website has this URL. Another implementation of markup would be with HTML extensions that places different syntaxes throughout the page with tagged attributes that name the properties and expose the structured data in both the head and the body of the pages. But we're going to focus on JSON-LD as a preferred method to use wherever possible. And you can also use Google's examples to create your JSON-LD markup rather than starting from scratch. So in order to bring this to life, we're going to use a case study example of a family recipe site. Structured data markup in AMP works for large publishers like Food Network and the New York Times, as you've seen, and it also works for anyone. including a small family recipe site. And in fact, this is not just any small family recipe site. This is my own family's recipe site. Recently, my husband and I optimized our existing family recipe site using structured data markup and AMP. So there are a few characters in the story so you can follow along the plot that I'll introduce first. First, the stroopwafel. You might know that a stroopwafel is a Dutch cookie with some caramel inside of some waffles, and it'll show up in pictures. And then Sander's Dutch stroopwafels. Sander is my 12-year-old son, and Kort Vonk is the site owner, and he's my husband. And he's also Dutch. So our site features a lot of Dutch family recipes, like the ones that you see here in the carousel, including Sander's Dutch stroopwafels. This rich carousel of search results from our recipe site appears when you ask Google Assistant, find recipes from Kort Vonk. And then you can choose one and send it to your Google Home. So here's the before and after with our recipe site. Before we made the changes for structured data, a page like on the left would show up in search for a specific query, like Sander's Dutch stroopwafel recipe. You can see there's pretty ordinary search result with a blue link and some unremarkable text. After we optimized it with structured data, on the other side, we started to participate in rich results and carousels for the same query. And you can spot a few more differences. Because of structured data markup, search is so much smarter about the data that it finds on our site and on this page. The generic blue link is gone. You can see a row of chips to select relevant content under the title Recipes. Search better understands our recipe content, of course, from the way the data is passed in the markup. With structured data markup for recipes, we were able to increase discovery for search and for Google Assistant at the same time with exactly the same work. And true story, at the end of April, we got an email, so it's like last week, from Google Assistant saying that our site traffic, although still pretty small, had increased more than 300% in the month of April, with 72% of user acquisition coming through organic search. So after our site was indexed and successfully converted to structured data, we noticed a page in the Actions directory. Earlier, you saw the Actions directory page for Food Network, and this is the Actions directory page for our family site rendered on a web browser or a desktop. The other one was obviously on mobile. Later on, we'll see how this page can be claimed, and we can go on to customize it with our own images and information. So for a closer look at what it takes to use structured data markup in AMP, let's look at the code. And we'll continue to use the family recipe site as an example. So first, the generic JSON LD structured data snippet for type recipe. In addition to the general structured data guidelines, you'll need to follow the specific guidelines for the structured data type that you have in order to be eligible in rich results displays in both search and assistant. So most search structured data uses open standard schema.org vocabulary, as I've mentioned, although what Google search might require could differ a little bit as what's required by schema.org. So Google is able to read JSON LD data when it's dynamically injected into a page's contents, and that's what we're doing in the family recipe site architecture. Here, the server-side PHP helps generate an AMP recipe page with markup using recipe data, details that are pulled out of the MySQL database. When a recipe page is requested by the web browser, PHP responds by consulting the database for the recipe details, then marks it up as HTML and returns the dynamic page results. This also inserts the structured data we added as JSON LD inside the script in the page in its head. So the highlighted part on the slide is the essence of what is new after optimizing with the structured data markup. Obviously, for a recipe collection, the type of structured data we used was the recipes type. So let's have a closer look at that. This is the first section of markup for the page recipe, specifically Sander's Dutch stroopwafels. Each page carries markup that's specific to it. So we see the result of where the recipe information from the database is pulled to generate markup. Going down the page, you can easily parse the resulting markup and see the name, description, author, recipe yield, prep time, and cook time. The format is always expressed as a set of attribute value pairs. So name, Sander's Dutch stroopwafels. You use recipe property markup for a single recipe at a time, not a category of recipes or a whole list. And there are 15 total recipe properties that are recommended, although only name is actually required. Going into this, we didn't have an image for every recipe in the collection, so that's something we're working on. But you can see the highlighted URL is the block of markup for a photo that would be for the big stack of gooey stroopwafels. So continuing the markup for the same recipe page, we have ratings. Inspired by structured data, we added ratings to the site, which isn't something that had been a feature before. You can see here the markup for ratings that includes data for the rating value, a count of reviews, and the best and worst rating for the recipe page. And now on the right, you can see how ratings will render in search results. And this is the direct result of adding the structured data markup for ratings on the page. You see the stars and the rating, etc. And now the last part of the markup, still for the same recipe, shows the rest of the format truncated a little bit to fit on the slide. Here we tag the recipe ingredients and pull the recipe instructions. And finally, the nutrition information. So for us, nutrition information was something we had in the database, but many of the fields were empty. And so adding more data has been a good enhancement here. And then at the end, you see we close the script. And now you've seen the full format for structured data for the recipe, for the type recipe. The structured data testing tool helps you to format your data correct to standards for whatever type you're using. Structured data testing tool is really easy to use. It's open. You can find it easily on Google search. And so running the page URL through the tool shows any anomalies as compared to the standards for the type that I'm testing. So you can see here that I have an error where the cook time was formatted in some way that I might just type it as a person, as compared to the ISO format that structured data requires. It's easy to go through and fix errors one at a time, and it would be recommended to do this really after just you have a few pages to check the format. So to summarize, our family recipe site optimization process with structured data, we followed the structured data guidelines to create the markup using JSON-LD. And remember, you can follow well-documented examples rather than starting from scratch. We then validate our code using the structured data testing tool, which is probably going to be an iterative process where you find and fix errors. Make sure to unblock robots.txt, no index, or any access controls, which might keep the crawlers from getting to your markup. And you're going to fix and monitor errors and re-index the site as you change it. So there are a few things that are special about using structured data markup and AMP to optimize for news content. Let's have a look. There's a special type news article with just two properties that are recommended in the case of non-AMP pages, the headline and the image as highlighted. For news articles, when you are optimizing with AMP mobile pages, additional properties are required. And those include the publisher, publisher name, the logo, URL, date published, date modified here and on the next slide. When AMP pages that have structured data, or AMP pages that have structured data can appear in a carousel of stories, like the ones that you saw from the New York Times earlier. Without the structured data, AMP pages can load fast, but they won't have that formatting. They would show up as standard blue links in search results. Also for news content, if you offer subscription-based access to your site, or if users need to register for access, there's a guideline that's specific to implementing structured data for subscription and paywalled content. If your site is marked up with structured data and AMP, following the standards for the type news article, and also follows the Google News index guidelines, you could apply to be included in Google News. So now I'm going to hand it to Zach to talk to you about how to leverage structured data markup for your podcast content.
All right, so let's walk through an example. This is how NPR's Planet Money podcast appears in the Actions directory, and Google Search, which was all generated with some simple markup. By structuring your podcast content, you can enable your podcast to appear in Google search results, along with individual episode descriptions and even an embedded player for each episode. Additionally, your content may be automatically turned into an action on the Google Assistant with a dedicated page in the Actions directory. In order for your podcast to be properly indexed, you'll need to first expose a valid RSS feed that conforms to RSS 2.0 specifications. Second, ensure that your feed has at least one episode. And third, have a dedicated homepage for your podcast that points to your RSS feed. We'll now cover the essential podcast level, episode level, and homepage markup requirements to make sure that your content is set up for success. This code shows the podcast level tags that need to get configured for your podcast RSS feed. This example takes us through the markup for NPR's Planet Money podcast. First, make sure that you have a tag that defines your podcast title. Here, this is Planet Money. The only two other requirements are tags that define your podcast homepage, along with episode tags, which we'll cover next. Optionally, you can also add tags that state the author, description, image, category, and language for your podcast. These are the episode level tags in your podcast RSS feed that would then need to get configured. The only two requirements here are the title of the episode and an enclosure tag, which points to the URL of the episode's audio file. Optionally, you can also configure a description, publication date, duration, and more for each episode. The last step is to make sure that your podcast has a homepage that very clearly describes what the podcast is about. NPR's page for Planet Money is shown here. Make sure that this page has a link that points to your podcast RSS URL. And then once that's all set up, you're on your way towards being optimized for both Google Search and Google Assistant just by configuring a few RSS tags. So we just reviewed structured data markup. Now, the next big opportunity is to then claim your page. Claiming your action will unlock three key capabilities for you. First, the ability to modify your directory listing. Second, the ability to view analytics on your action's performance. And then third, the opportunity for improved ranking and discovery. Here's the directory page that was created for Barrie's recipe content using structured markup. Once a directory page is created for your content, you'll be able to claim the action simply by creating a project on the Actions on Google Developer Console, which is the hub for creating, managing, and optimizing your actions. Shown here, the Actions on Google Developer Console is the place where you'll be able to manage your actions after you claim them. Once you claim, you'll notice that there is a dedicated section for you to modify your directory information. You can use the console to change up your images and descriptions to more accurately reflect your actions and its content. Additionally, once your actions are claimed, you'll even be able to view these analytics in the console. The console can help you to quickly monitor your action's star ratings over time, along with directory page views. For claimed actions, users will have the ability to rate and submit written reviews for your content. This is all accessed using the Actions directory. So for example, this is how ratings and reviews will appear on the directory page for Barrie's recipe content. User reviews are one of many quality indicators that we are used to impact ranking. Most importantly though, ratings and reviews are benchmarks that users depend on when looking for authentic and relevant feedback. All of this functionality is accessible simply by using structured data markup. Now that we just covered claiming your action, let's discuss by how creating a custom conversational action, you can take advantage of the best that both Actions on Google and the Google Assistant have to offer. So, you can either use markup to optimize your existing content for a more assistive experience, Or you can decide to build custom actions with a much more conversational and AI focus. To take full advantage of the Google Assistant, the best path is to build a custom conversational action. We'll now discuss the thought process, rationale, and overview of creating these custom actions. To start, you will most likely need to revisit your content's identity for the AI-first world. Your action will need more than just graphics. It will need a fully developed personality. So for example, is your content funny or serious? What voice will represent your content? And how can you tailor the personality of your action to stand out in a conversational environment? Users are not just looking to access your website in an audio form. The more rich your conversational interaction, the more we can then suggest your action to increase discovery. The assistant learns from the directory and other information about which actions may be best for assisting the user with their needs. So rather than needing to include your brand's name, your content may be recommended to the user. Our goal is to recommend actions that provide users with a really high-quality end-user experience. And the best way to create this more tailored branded experience is to visit the Actions on Google Developer Console and create a custom action from scratch. Many providers, both large and small, have elected to go the custom action route. We've been working with partners like Food Network to enhance their user experience with custom actions. So as you see here, Food Network's custom action is being triggered.
I can help you find recipes by name, ingredient, or chef. What would you like?
What's on now?
Right now on Food Network, we've just started an episode of The Pioneer Woman. Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives is coming up at 11 a.m. Pacific. You can ask for episode details or for recipes. Which would you like?
How about some episode recipes?
Recipes from The Pioneer Woman, The Middles.
The first one.
Bow tie skillet Alfredo.
Email it to me for later.
Okay, I've just sent this recipe to your email address. Delish. What else can I help you with?
Food Network's custom conversational action, which you just experienced, helps users find inspiration in the kitchen across devices with both displays and like ice-free surfaces such as Google Home. Not only can users find recipes from their favorite chefs and shows, but they can also send recipes via email and see upcoming show times. Food Network optimizes their content for the conversational world and creates several opportunities for re-engagement. First, users can ask when their show is on air. Then, they can ask for the recipe currently being prepared on the show. And then finally, they'll have the ability to share the recipe outside of Assistant to enjoy later. In natural language, all elements of a conversational flow are usually woven together in a coherent thread that includes context. Food Network helps guide users to relevant information and anticipates their behavior. This is the new Actions on Google Developer Console, which makes it easier than ever to create custom actions for your content. When you create a project, you can choose from several categories that will tailor your workflow. So whether you're a podcast provider trying to allow new users to discover your content, or a news provider attempting to re-engage with your followers, the Actions on Google Developer Console is the place to get started. The console's workflow glides you through the different stages of development. First, set up some initial information about how you would like to be discovered. Build actions that will help users get things done with the information that they both want and need. Then test your actions, either on devices or by using our new web simulator to run through user flows. Then deploy your actions either to production or to limited alpha and beta audiences. Then finally, measure the success of your actions with additional rich analytics on usage, errors, and discovery channels. It's as simple as setup, build, test, deploy, and measure. There are numerous surfaces that you could target with your custom actions, including those with audio output and those with screen output. Building custom actions will allow you to tailor the experience based on the device being used. For devices with screens, including phones, televisions, or smart displays, you can craft special responses that really take advantage of the screen. If you're a podcast provider, consider showing video clips and images that can play alongside the audio. News and recipe providers can render rich graphics that add even more meaning to a story or recipe. However, don't forget to also optimize for the eyes and hands-free experiences that speakers have to offer. Whether it's getting ready in the morning or running out the door to commute to and from work, users won't always have the ability to interact with the display. Users won't have the time to browse a website for information if they need to keep their eyes on something else or if their hands are full. These are critical opportunities throughout a user's day that you'll be able to present some really key information such as news stories or a brand new episode of your podcast, for example. We built the assistant leveraging the latest advances in machine learning, AI, and natural language processing, along with Google's technology stack, to create a really advanced assistive experience. And you too can leverage this power while creating your actions in a multitude of ways. To start, actions are full of endless opportunities. You can use our vast array of cards to display substantial on-screen information in the form of text, hyperlinks, and images for your content. You can also leverage speech synthesis markup language, or SSML, to make your responses even more lifelike. Then, play around with our brand theme customizations to control your content's visual appearance, especially in some of our beautiful new smart displays. So here's an example of what Barrie's custom action could look like running on a smart display by leveraging theme customizations that were configured in the Actions on Google developer console. This is an awesome opportunity for Barrie to show off a nice big photo of stroopwafels along with a link to the full recipe to truly help her content stand out. Actions are personal. Custom conversational actions allow you to use Google Assistant's location and context awareness alongside account linking and user storage to tailor your experiences for individual users of your actions. If you're a content provider, the Google Assistant presents a special opportunity for you to interact with your users. The signed-in nature of Assistant will allow you to provide personalized podcast, recipe, and news story recommendations. You can also use the Assistant to augment the content consumption experience. For podcast providers, you can give additional information about guests and stories being discussed on a given episode. If you're a news provider, use Google Assistant to help guide users and provide them with augmenting information about people and places being discussed, along with relevant recommendations such as articles and news stories. Barrie can also leverage personalizations for the custom actions for her recipe content. So there might be conversations that would benefit from knowing a user's name or location. Suppose Barrie wants to suggest to her users where they can find and purchase ingredients and supplies for a recipe. She can also suggest common ingredients that might appear in a recipe, or pairing drinks and sides that would go well with a recipe. Barrie could then use localization to provide recipes to her users in a wide variety of languages. Actions are re-engaging. With custom conversational actions, you can use action links to share a URL that will deep link users directly into your action. For your content, you can also implement our Updates API to inform users about upcoming shows, stories, and special events using push notifications. The Updates API can also allow Barrie to send daily recipe recommendations to her users. Custom conversational actions are even transactional. By taking advantage of our Transactions API along with account linking, you can leverage transactions to allow users to seamlessly purchase premium content, merchandise, and other physical or digital goods. This was just an overview of the few of the things that you could do by creating custom actions. And there's much, much more. Even when you're at best, there's always room to grow with custom conversational actions. In conclusion, structured markup in AMP allows you to take your existing web content and optimize it for both Google Search and Google Assistant. You will also be eligible for having a page in the Actions directory. In fact, many of you have already completed the necessary markup for your content. If so, you'll notice that there is already a page in the directory for you to then claim your action. Claiming will allow you to modify your directory listing, view analytics, and receive ratings and written reviews for your content. However, to go above and beyond the limitations of markup, visit the Actions on Google Developer Console to create a custom conversational action. Doing so will allow you to use many exciting personalization, re-engagement, and transactional features and APIs as you build out your custom actions. The opportunities for what you can create for your content are truly endless. We cannot wait to see what you can build with custom conversational actions to leverage the full power of both Actions on Google and the Google Assistant. And if you haven't done so already, you've also seen how to get started with structured data markup and reach Google Assistant users looking for answers and help getting things done throughout their day. To see some really awesome demos, go ahead and check out our Assistant Sandbox and attend our office hours to have one-on-one assistance with any of your questions. Thank you, and we hope you all continue to have a really great Google I/O.